It began not with silence, but with a stamp. On the second day of February in Ouagadougou, a small booklet of deep blue leather was raised before cameras. Some mocked it as worthless, a document born already dead. Yet within hours, the same booklet was recognized by international aviation authorities, later confirmed valid in European systems, and swiftly embraced by China. What was supposed to be Africa's embarrassment had transformed into its boldest declaration of sovereignty. This passport is more than paper. It is a statement of belonging, an emblem of defiance, a seed planted in Sahelian soil. But from the first moment, it collided with a storm of rumors. Was it accepted? Was it rejected? Who had the power to decide? These questions turned an administrative announcement into a global drama. Stay with us. This is not just about borders, it is about dignity. Subscribe and walk with us as we uncover how a small document forced the world to reveal its true face. The morning sun over Ouagadougou carried a weight that words could barely hold. On the 2nd of February 2025, crowds gathered in the capital of Burkina Faso to witness a moment that had been years in the making. A passport, born not of colonial bureaucracy or foreign diktats, but of African will, was placed into the hands of ordinary citizens. The alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, had unveiled their first collective travel document, the AES passport. At first glance, it seemed no more than a piece of leather and ink. Yet in its pages lay the essence of sovereignty. The leaders of the three nations had chosen to step away from the West African Economic and Monetary Union, leaving behind the privileges of regional documents tied to ECOWAS. Critics had warned that by doing so, they would isolate their people, closing doors rather than opening them. But instead of retreat, the governments pressed forward. The passport was their response, a declaration that integration would not be dictated from Paris or Brussels, but rebuilt from within Africa itself. The ceremony itself was rich in symbolism. Dignitaries sat side by side as Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, oversaw the issuance of the first booklet. Cameras captured the image of citizens holding up their passports with pride, smiles etched on faces that understood this was no ordinary document. It was a shield, a key, a badge of dignity. Yet even as the photographs spread, so too did doubt. Within hours, social media erupted. Posts claimed that the passport had already been rejected abroad. Viral videos alleged that France had dismissed it, that the European Union refused to issue visas, and that even China had turned it away. One particularly slick video on TikTok declared, "This is the shortest-lived passport in history." To millions scrolling through their feeds, the message was clear. What had been unveiled with triumph was already dead on arrival. The irony was sharp. How could a passport unveiled in public, compliant with international aviation standards, be invalid? The very existence of the ceremony was proof that due process had been followed. The AES leaders had anchored their document within the framework of the International Civil Aviation Organization, ensuring that technically it was legitimate from the start. Recognition in the world of travel does not depend on the whim of any single government, but on compliance with global standards. Still, the rumors spread faster than clarifications could keep up. International headlines soon echoed the noise. Instead of celebrating a landmark of African integration, Western outlets framed the story as a question mark. Would the passport be accepted? Would citizens find themselves stranded? The framing was subtle yet powerful. By posing the issue as a matter of doubt rather than fact, global media tilted the balance toward suspicion. Africa's bold step toward sovereignty was once again filtered through a lens of uncertainty. Observers quickly noted the pattern. This was not the first time that initiatives from the Sahel had been met with a barrage of disinformation. Whether it was Mali's withdrawal from French-led military missions or Burkina Faso's decision to nationalize parts of its gold sector, every assertion of independence was followed by a wave of narratives predicting collapse. The AES passport fitted neatly into this script. A symbol of autonomy turned into a target for ridicule. But beneath the noise, the truth remained. The document was real, valid, and rooted in law. Those who stood in line to apply did not do so out of convenience. Many still held older ECOWAS documents that had not yet expired. They came because they wished to carry a symbol of sovereignty in their pockets. For them, the passport was not just a travel tool, but a declaration of who they were. The contrast between the pride on the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, and the mockery online was stark. On one side, farmers, traders, and students held their new passports aloft as proof of dignity. On the other, anonymous accounts churned out claims of rejection, humiliation, and futility. It was as though the document itself had become a battlefield, not of visas and checkpoints, but of legitimacy and perception. The first chapter of the AES passport story, therefore, was not about airports or borders, but about narrative. A seed had been planted in African soil, but whether it would flourish or be uprooted depended not only on compliance with rules, but on the ability to defend sovereignty against disinformation. The stage was set for confrontation, between fact and fiction, between pride and ridicule, between the voice of Africa and the echo of doubt. And yet one question loomed above all. Who beyond Africa would be the first to validate this new passport, and who would try to deny it? Confusion did not fade, it grew. Within days of the launch, the AES passport had become more than a travel document. It was a lightning rod. Every television broadcast, every radio show, every social media feed carried some version of the story. Some framed it as Africa's bold leap forward. Others painted it as a farce, a doomed experiment destined to collapse. The storm was not accidental. Analysts at Disinfo Africa, a regional fact-checking platform, soon discovered that their earliest viral posts were not organic. They came from networks that had long targeted Sahelian governments with coordinated narratives of failure. Accounts posted in French, English, and Arabic almost simultaneously, amplifying one another in a pattern too precise to be spontaneous. A video claiming that French border police had confiscated an AES passport appeared on 5 platforms within 20 minutes, reaching hundreds of thousands before any correction could be issued. For ordinary citizens, this was disorienting. A farmer in Niger who had seen his neighbor hold a new passport in his hands was suddenly told online that the same document was invalid. A student in Burkina Faso, eager to apply for her own booklet, scrolled past posts warning that she would be humiliated at foreign airports. Doubt spread faster than reassurance, eroding confidence even as governments published clarifications. Western media outlets, rather than calming the storm, amplified it. Headlines in major newspapers highlighted uncertainty. Will the AES passport be recognized? Became the dominant frame, even though the technical answer was already yes under ICAO rules. In effect, the media placed sovereignty on trial, asking whether Africa's decision was valid without external blessing. Inside the Sahel, the mood was different. Crowds in Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey treated the launch as a festival of dignity. People queued outside administrative offices not merely to apply, but to be part of history. For them, carrying the passport was an act of defiance, a daily reminder that their nations no longer bowed to the dictates of foreign unions. The more the rumors spread, the more determined they became to show their pride. Leaders understood this dynamic. Their speeches did not dwell on technical compliance with aviation codes. Instead, they spoke of dignity, independence, and unity. The passport was framed not as a bureaucratic item, but as a shield of sovereignty. This booklet is not just leather and paper, declared one official in Bamako. It is the proof that we decide who we are. Such language resonated with people far more than explanations about database codes or consular protocols. Yet the battle was not only about pride, it was also about power. By shaping the global conversation, detractors sought to weaken the AES experiment before it could take root. If enough people believed the passport was useless, its value would diminish, regardless of legal reality. Legitimacy, after all, is as much about perception as law. This was the moment of climax. Would the AES passport survive its baptism of fire? Could 3 Sahelian states resist not only political pressure, but also the invisible hand of disinformation shaping global opinion? The answer began to emerge in the reactions of ordinary citizens. Instead of abandoning the project, they embraced it. Photos circulated of smiling families holding their passports up to the camera, declaring their pride. Local broadcasters aired footage of first-time applicants collecting their documents. Influencers on African social media platforms posted videos explaining the passport's validity under ICAO, countering the tide of misinformation with clarity and humor. It was a counter-narrative born from below. Instead of silence, Africa responded with images, testimonies, and proof. By mid-February, pictures of AES passports bearing Schengen visas and Chinese entry stamps began to circulate online. They were not press releases, but the lived experiences of travelers. In the face of rumor, reality spoke louder. The emotional high point came when comparisons were drawn. In Europe, confusion reigned as systems struggled to adapt. In China, confirmation was immediate and unambiguous. The contrast became a story of its own. One power hesitant, another decisive. The passport had forced the world to reveal its attitudes towards African sovereignty. At the height of the controversy, one truth became clear. The AES passport was no longer simply a document. It had become a battlefield of narratives, a symbol of whether Africa could assert its own legitimacy in a world still shadowed by colonial hierarchies. The climax of the story was not measured at airports or consulates, but in the hearts of those who carried the booklet with pride. If Africa had proven its resilience at home, how would the outside world respond? Would Europe embrace the document or delay its recognition? The dust of the launch had hardly settled when deeper questions emerged. Beyond the spectacle of ceremonies and the storm of disinformation, what would the AES passport mean for ordinary lives? Sovereignty is not tested in speeches, but in the daily movements of citizens, in the ease with which they cross borders, in the pride or humiliation they feel when their documents are inspected abroad. In Burkina Faso, the sight of families queuing for their new passport revealed something more profound than administrative necessity. Many still held valid ECOWAS documents. They did not need a replacement urgently. Yet they came. For them, the AES passport was a mark of belonging, proof that their country and its Sahelian partners were building institutions independent of outside control. Carrying it was an act of affirmation, a quiet revolution in the pocket of every farmer, every trader, every student. Still, the transition was not without cost. By leaving ECOWAS, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso forfeited access to regional travel privileges that had once allowed freer movement across West Africa. Traders accustomed to moving goods easily across borders now faced uncertainty as neighboring states adjusted their policies. Small businesses that relied on regional markets feared disruption. Students who dreamed of studying abroad worried about delays in visa processing. Sovereignty carried pride but also risk. Inside the political sphere, however, the passport strengthened the hand of national leaders. In Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré's decision to issue the new booklet was hailed as a bold strike for dignity. To supporters, it confirmed that his government was not merely reacting to colonial legacies, but actively shaping an independent path. In Niamey and Bamako, the symbolism was equally powerful. Leaders could present themselves not as isolated figures, but as architects of a collective project. This dynamic created a paradox. The same move that critics abroad called isolating was celebrated at home as unifying. In the streets of Burkina Faso, chants of solidarity echoed not only for the nation itself, but for the broader Sahel. People spoke of themselves not just as Burkinabe, Nigerian, or Malian, but as members of a confederation daring to defy the old order. The passport was a piece of paper, yes, but it was also a mirror reflecting a new identity. Economically, the picture was more complex. Investors wary of political instability in the Sahel now faced an additional question. Would the exit from ECOWAS and the adoption of a joint passport complicate trade? Some feared that international firms might hesitate to engage with a region portrayed in headlines as turbulent. Yet others saw opportunity. By consolidating institutions and asserting sovereignty, the AES created space for new forms of partnership unmediated by Paris or Brussels. The question was whether domestic stability could sustain that promise. The social consequences of the misinformation campaign were equally important. For weeks, citizens were caught between pride and doubt. To be told that the document in their hands was invalid struck at something deeper than convenience. It cast doubt on their very identity. Disinformation, after all, is not merely about politics. It is psychological warfare. To undermine confidence in a passport is to undermine confidence in belonging itself. That was the true danger of the narrative war. Yet resilience shone through. People did not abandon the project. They applied, they traveled, they shared their stories. Each photograph of an AES passport stamped with a visa was not only proof of technical validity, but an act of resistance. Sovereignty was being validated not in courtrooms, but in airports and embassies, one stamp at a time. For Burkina Faso, the stakes were especially high. Traoré's government, already defined by its break with the old order, needed tangible symbols to reinforce legitimacy. The passport provided that. Critics called his rise a coup. Supporters framed it as a revolution of dignity. Either way, the AES passport became entwined with his political story. It was not just about mobility, it was about memory, about whether his leadership would be remembered as defiant or doomed. And here lies the connection to the broader struggle. The Ibrahim Traoré coup, as some international headlines described it, was more than a change of power. It was the spark that led Burkina Faso down a path of self-determination that culminated in projects like the AES passport. For citizens, carrying the document was a way of carrying that history, of declaring allegiance to sovereignty over submission. Still, uncertainty remained. Would the rest of Africa embrace the AES initiative or treat it as a risky experiment? Would regional integration be rebuilt on new terms, or would the Sahel find itself isolated? For every success story of a visa issued, there lingered the fear of rejection at some border yet to be tested. Pride could not erase the practical challenges of a new order. The consequences were therefore layered. On the surface, the passport offered dignity. Beneath it carried risks of disruption. But at its core, it symbolized a political transformation that could not be measured in statistics alone. Sovereignty, once abstract, was now tangible. It had weight, color, and a place in the pocket of every citizen willing to claim it. And as the months unfolded, one reality became unavoidable. While citizens at home embraced the document, the true test would come from abroad. How would Europe respond? Beyond the streets of Bamako and Ouagadougou, the fate of the AES passport rested on the desks of foreign consulates. If sovereignty was celebrated at home, it was still on trial abroad. The question was no longer whether citizens felt pride, but whether other powers would treat the document as legitimate. In Europe, the story unfolded in slow motion. Travelers who presented their new passports at Schengen consulates encountered hesitation. Appointment systems still listed the older ECOWAS templates. Border management databases had not yet been updated. Clerks, uncertain of how to process the applications, placed files on hold or required manual overrides. To ordinary applicants, this looked like rejection. To critics online, it was fuel, proof that Europe had refused the passport. Yet in reality, no formal rejection existed. The problem was bureaucracy, not legality. Still, the optics mattered. Silence from European institutions in the early weeks allowed rumors to thrive unchecked. Only later did consulates begin to confirm publicly that AES passports were valid once their systems caught up. Photos of Schengen visas affixed to the new documents began to circulate by mid-February, proving the rumors false. But by then, the damage to perception had been done. Doubt lingers longer than confirmation. The unevenness of Europe's response revealed deeper currents. Countries with colonial histories in the Sahel, above all France, were the slowest to clarify their stance. Others, like Hungary or Poland, quietly accepted the new passport once their databases were adjusted. The divergence was telling. Where historical baggage was heavier, hesitation was greater. Where ties were looser, recognition came with less resistance. Behind the bureaucratic delays lay political unease. For decades, African mobility to Europe has been entangled in narratives of migration and security. The sudden appearance of a new joint passport from 3 Sahelian states triggered anxieties in Brussels. Policy analysts speculated, without evidence, that it might be used to facilitate irregular migration. Fear, not law, shaped much of the hesitation. In Washington, by contrast, silence prevailed. The United States did not issue immediate statements on the passport's status. Analysts debated whether this reflected caution, disinterest, or a wait-and-see approach. For the AES states, the absence of clarity from such a major global power remained a gap. If Europe stumbled through confusion, another actor moved with striking clarity. Within days of the launch, Chinese embassies in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou issued statements recognizing the AES passport as valid for visa applications. At a press conference in Beijing, the foreign ministry dismissed rumors of rejection as baseless. The contrast could not have been sharper. Where Europe hesitated, China affirmed. This swift recognition carried symbolic weight. It fit neatly into Beijing's broader Africa policy, to present itself not as a tutor, but as a partner, engaging through infrastructure projects, trade, and development rather than lectures. By validating the passport without hesitation, China positioned itself as a power ready to respect Africa's right to define its own institutions. For the AES states, this was the validation they sought. Not reluctant adjustment, but immediate affirmation. For observers, the difference told a larger story. Europe's delays exposed the weight of colonial legacies and suspicion. China's speed signaled an alternative, a partnership framed in terms of sovereignty and pragmatism. In this contrast, the AES passport became more than a document. It became a mirror reflecting how the world chooses to relate to Africa in the 21st century. If the East had already spoken with clarity, would the West ever move beyond hesitation? The AES passport, born in the heat of controversy, now stands at a crossroads. Its leather cover may be small, but the choices it represents are vast. What comes next will decide whether it remains a contested symbol or becomes a cornerstone of African integration. The first path is one of consolidation. If Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso succeed in embedding the passport within daily life, it could evolve into the foundation of a broader Sahelian identity. More states might join, extending its reach beyond the current alliance. Over time, the AES passport could rival older regional documents, proving that integration can be rebuilt from within rather than dictated from external frameworks. This scenario carries promise: smoother travel across allied states, unified markets, and a tangible expression of independence. The second path is fraught with obstacles. The torrent of disinformation that accompanied the launch will not disappear. Each future attempt at sovereignty, whether nationalizing resources, forming new alliances, or building shared institutions, is likely to trigger similar campaigns of doubt. The danger lies in fatigue. If citizens grow weary of defending their symbols, if rumors spread faster than reassurance, the project could falter. Sovereignty, once undermined in perception, is difficult to reclaim. The third path lies in transformation. The AES passport might become more than a Sahelian initiative. By standing firm against misinformation and earning recognition abroad, it could inspire other African states to take similar steps. In this sense, it would not merely secure the mobility of its holders, but reshape the very conversation about Africa's place in the world. If one landlocked confederation can assert legitimacy, what prevents the rest of the continent from doing the same? For ordinary citizens, the stakes are personal. A trader crossing borders with fewer delays, a student applying for visas without confusion, a farmer holding the emblem of sovereignty in his pocket. These are the measures of success. For leaders, the stakes are political. Failure would invite critics to dismiss their project as naive. Success would enshrine them as visionaries who planted seeds of dignity in rocky soil. The road ahead will be neither simple nor swift. Bureaucratic systems in Europe may adapt slowly, but every stamp affixed to the AES passport strengthens its standing. China's recognition has already shown that external validation can arrive without condescension. What matters now is whether Africa can sustain momentum, refusing to let outsiders narrate its story. And so the future of the AES passport remains unwritten. It could fade as a short-lived experiment, or it could endure as a lasting testament to self-determination. The outcome depends not only on governments, but on the resolve of citizens who choose to carry it with pride. Will this passport remain a contested booklet, or will it become the road on which Africa walks toward a new era of sovereignty? What began as a small booklet of deep blue leather has become something far greater. The AES passport is no longer simply a travel document. It is a shield of sovereignty, a living reminder that Africa can write its own legitimacy without waiting for the stamp of others. From the moment it was unveiled, critics rushed to dismiss it, disinformation sought to humiliate it, and doubt spread like wildfire. Yet in the hands of ordinary citizens, stamped by foreign embassies, it endured. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the passport is a continuation of a larger journey. The Ibrahim Traoré Coup was not only a rupture in politics, but also the beginning of a wider project of independence. Every page of the passport carries that story forward, transforming the memory of upheaval into the reality of institutions. It represents not collapse, but resilience. The deeper significance is continental. If three landlocked nations can create a joint document that withstands disinformation and secures recognition, what might the rest of Africa achieve? The Burkina Faso Revolution, as some have called the broader movement of sovereignty, demonstrates that change is not confined to speeches or rallies. It lives in the everyday objects citizens carry: passports, IDs, and currencies, which silently affirm their dignity. The test is not over. Europe still hesitates, disinformation networks remain active, and skeptics continue to predict failure. But the AES passport has already proven a crucial point. Legitimacy is not granted by outsiders, it is exercised by those who claim it. Each stamp on its pages is a step forward. Each journey a reminder that sovereignty is lived, not negotiated. And so, as the world watches, Africa writes its own narrative. The Ibrahim Traoré coup may have startled the old order, but it also opened the door to new possibilities. This passport is more than paper. It is a promise. A promise that Africa will no longer ask permission to exist. If you believe sovereignty should be defined by those who live it, join this journey. Comment with your thoughts, share this story of dignity, and subscribe to stand with the voices shaping Africa's future.